For this video I want to show you guys the entire process for how I created this wisp that you see right here, with its fire head, changing colours and emissive and translucent materials. I'll timestamp each section, so feel free to jump around to whichever bit you're more interested in. So welcome back to the channel everyone, and if you don't know me, my name is Sarah and I also go by the name of Sarah Arts on this channel. Okay, so let's just jump right into it. There's a lot to cover in today's video, so we'll just get right into it. So I first started by making the high poly sculpt in ZBrush, but if you're not wanting to use this software and you're looking for a free alternative, you can also sculpt in Blender. So this wisp was meant to be very simple in terms of sculpting detail. The detail really came in more so at the material stage and the fire head stage. So what I done is I started with a sphere for the head, and then I used the move brush tool and symmetry on for this, and then I squashed and stretched the head until it was at the desired result. I basically done the same as well for the body. I took a sphere and used the move brush again to sort of create a tapered out tail, and to make it taper out more, the way I done this is I made the brush size smaller, and I also used the smooth tool a lot just in general for the whole piece to keep it really soft. And I basically done the same again for the arms. What I done is I took a sphere and then this time I used the move tool to make it more of a long egg shape, and then I used the move brush and the inflate brush just to get to the desired results. Once I was happy with this, I used the mirror and well just to save making another arm, and then that was the high poly done at that point. Originally for the eyes and the mouth, I actually had these really detailed, like over detailed planes for them. This later changed though, and I'll show you guys what I ended up changing it to. It was essentially some very simple alpha planes instead of these, for performance reasons and also for animation purposes, but I'll show you guys that later down the line. So after going back and forth with the concept artist, they were pretty happy with how it was looking just now, so this is when I could push it forward onto the retopology stage, so let's get on with that bit. So for retopology I used Maya, but again if you're looking for a free alternative, I'm certain that there's ways you can do it in Blender as well. There's definitely some great videos out there that I have seen before about how to do that there. But for Maya I used the quad draw function, and I always like to, when I'm retopologizing, start it sort of a bit off the center line and then work my way outwards. I just like this as a personal preference because I feel like it makes the front faces look very smooth and just like well laid out, and it's also great for when it comes to mirroring the retopology. So if you're wanting to mirror your retopology, it's super simple and easy to do, so I'll just go over that now with you guys. So once you have retopology that you're happy with, you want to come off the quad draw function, make sure that you selected that low poly object side that you've just created as an object. You want to make the pivot the edge that you want it to be mirroring from. So to do this, you want to first off start by clicking this magnet here that is snap to point, and then you're going to go onto the move toggle tool and then simply move this tool to the desired location. And now you should have the axis at that section. After this, go to mesh, then mirror, and go into the options for this. You want to make sure that what axis you are mirroring from lines up with what you want. So let's say for example I want to mirror this to the left side, and for this I want to have it on -x because it's on the left hand side of that axis that you see in the diagram on the left hand corner. If I were wanting to mirror this on the right hand side, I would want it to have on +x. I hope that makes sense. I'm not the best at describing, but basically if it's on the the side that is like the left hand side of the axis, you're probably wanting to use it in the negatives, but if it's on the other side you're usually wanting to use it in the positives. Of course play around with this but for me that's always worked. If you have a mesh that has a lot of symmetry, this will save a lot of time because you're not having to retopologize the other side all over again. You can just simply mirror it over. Because I knew I wanted to use this character for animation, I did have to keep some things in mind, like edge loops and the number of polys that were being used. So for the areas like the elbows and the torso and the tail, I added more edge loops around here just to make sure that when it was bending it wasn't going to break the mesh. So after retopology was completed in Maya, I then also done the UV mapping process in Maya as well. So I like the seams for my characters and objects as well to be in the most discreet places they can be possible, because it's not nice when you can kind of see that seam when you're playing games or whatever. It's just not that pretty. So for the wisp I put the seams down the back of the head and the back of the body, and for the arms I put it on the inner side of them. I just felt like these were the most discreet places that would be suitable for the character, and they didn't invade any places where it's maybe going to look a little bit weird. So I kept the face completely clear of any seams. I started the seam just before the top of the face and then also just after the bottom of the face. Now you've probably already noticed the facial expressions going on here with the wisp and how they are some very simple planes. They're legit just like a plane with 4 faces on them. So as I mentioned earlier, the facial features were originally fixed meshes, but I instead opted for planes. The reason I done this is so that I could use alpha cards and change the facial expressions that way, rather than having to manipulate the mesh through a facial rig. So to create these, I literally just added a plane to Maya and then put these for the eyes and for the mouth. I then straightened these in the UV tile section so that they had their own UV tile. Now that the building blocks are in place, I can officially start on all the fun stuff. So I took the base mesh over into Substance Painter. So to begin with, before anything else, if you're wanting to see the emissive channels and the translucent ones in Substance Painter, you need to go over to View, Shaders, and change the shader to PBR Metallic Roughness with Alpha Blending. Of course, I'm doing this for Unreal, and I'm pretty sure for Unity you need a different setup. I think it's more like specular and something else. But for Unreal, it is the Roughness Metallic one. And then you want to go over onto this section and click the plus icon and add the emissive and the opacity. This will allow you to add emissive and opacity related things to your materials. So if you're wanting slight translucency, you can change that, and if you're wanting to have like an emissive blue, you can add that as well. So for the textures, I added a few layers, and each layer had a slightly different like color of blue to it. So it was like maybe a deeper blue or a lighter blue, and they also had different levels of emissiveness and opacity. This was just to help it really smoothly taper off from those high emissive and opacity areas into the less ones. To blend this out, I used a smudge brush for each layer where the border was, just to make it as smooth as possible. And to create the red version of the wisp, I literally just took all of these material texture inputs and just changed the colour on them from blue to red. I didn't want to change the value that they were at or the saturation, just because I feel like that'd be quite a harsh contrast between the red and the blue ones. I literally just wanted to change it from blue to red. So that's what I done for each texture input. Okay, so after textures were exported, I brought them into Unreal. So let's hop on over there to see where all the magic happens. It makes it really look really cool with all the particle systems and the changing the materials. So once I imported the low poly and the textures, I wanted to create a new material. This is the one that I ended up creating for the wisp, and it includes the wisp being able to change from blue to red and also have the ability to fade out. So there's quite a bit going on here, but I promise it's easier than it looks. We'll just go through it step by step. So because I didn't change anything besides the base colour for the blue to red wisp in Substance Painter, therefore the opacity map I exported and the emissive mask are both the same for each colour variation. I'm going to go through the material setup from top to bottom, and then I'll go over more how I approach the colour change and the fade in and out afterwards. Before anything else though, if you want to be able to see the opacity in your material, you need to head over to the details section, go to blend mode and select translucent. Okay, now that that's done, we can first start by going over the base colour. So here we have the blue and red base colour. These then connect to a lerp node, also known as linear interpolate. The node will allow us to later on switch between these two colours. So I have the blue colour connected to the A input and the red into the B input. You'll see here I have a material parameter collections connected to the alpha channel. And in short, this is basically the switch that will allow us to transition between blue and red. So to add this, simply right click and search for collection parameters. This will be empty at the moment, but that's fine because we'll work on this later. For emissive, I start with the opacity texture exported from Substance Painter. I then branch this off onto 2 different paths, one for the blue and one for the red. I wanted to enhance the saturation at this point for the blue and for the red, so played around with this at this point. To add a colour, all you want to do is add a constant free vector, and then you can double click on this and change the colour. This was then multiplied with the emissive texture. I then wanted to have a parameter to play around with how emissive the wisp could be. So this is really simple. All you have to do is right click on the B input of your multiply node and select promote to parameter. Then name this something that makes sense to you, so something like emissive or emissive intensity. That means when you go to your material results node and click on parameters, you can play around with the intensity of that parameter to change how emissive you want the materials to look. So after doing this for the blue colour, I've done pretty much the exact same thing for the red, taking the emissive mask, multiplying it by a red colour and then multiplying that output by a parameter to control the emissive strength. I then inputted both of these information into a lerp node, again blue information in the A input and red in the B, and I then just used the exact same collection parameter node for the alpha channel here as well, and then put that into the emissive channel of the results node. And the last piece of information we need here for the main structure of the material is the opacity. So for the opacity, the main focus wasn't to change the color of the wisp, but being able to make the wisp fade in and fade out. So for this, I first started with the opacity texture exported from Substance Painter. I then multiplied this with a constant free vector of a higher value. This information was then plugged into the A input of the lerp node, and the B input was really simple. It was just a black value because I wanted it to be completely translucent. Then for the alpha channel, we want to create another collections parameter, but this time it'll be slightly different from the one we used for the emissive and base color, but we'll cover that in just a moment and it'll make much more sense. Okay, so now that the main material is set up, we now have everything in place that we need to make this material emissive, translucent, and everything is ready and in place to allow it to change colours and to fade in and out. All we need now is to address the material collection parameters. I do want to point out here that the method that I'm using to approach this is so that I can animate these in a level sequence. Having a material parameter collections as a toggle will allow me to actually add it into the level sequence and animate that transition. But there are other ways to approach this if you're not really fussed about having it in a level sequence. So for example, you could use a switch node instead of a lerp, and then that means that in the parameter section you can literally just switch between the blue and the red, or the fade in and fade out. There won't be any sort of gradual change, it'll literally just switch between the two. Or if you want a more gradual change but you're still not fussed about it being in a level sequence, you could always still use a lerp node, but rather than a material parameter collection, just use a parameter node, and then you can scale this between 0 and 1 for a smooth transition. So let's say if you wanted it not red and not blue but somewhere in between, you could do that, or if you wanted it slightly faded out but not entirely, you could also change that there. So I went over this briefly in the last section. You'll need 2 material parameter collections set up. So how I went about creating these was by right clicking in the content drawer, going to material, then material parameter collection. You then want to create this and name it something that makes sense to you. So for me, since I knew I wanted this to assist in the changing colour of the wisp and also for fading it in and out, I just gave it a really simple name. I named it blue to red to fade out outer body wisp. Admittedly not the smartest naming process, but it was indeed the most accurate and straight to the point and accurate of literally what the parameter would do. So there was a very slim chance of me being like, what is this parameter for? I knew exactly what it would be for. So this parameter is going to be the key to the material all coming together. This parameter will allow us to switch from blue to red, red to blue, blue to fade, fade to red. There are many possibilities here. So let's open up the material parameter. Now usually when you open it up as a new material parameter collection, it will look something like this. And what you want to do is click on the plus icon on the scalar parameter section, and you want to do this twice. So for instance, I knew one array would be for changing the colour of the wisp, so I named it colour, and then the other one would be for fading it in and out, so I named it fade. It was straightforward and to the point. You then want to head back over to your material that you created earlier, and you'll now see if you click on each material parameter collection created, on the left hand side you can select the collection of choice, which should be in your case the one material parameter collection that you created, and then you can select the parameter name. So since I knew for the base color and the emissive color the purpose was to change the color, I've selected the color parameter. And for the material collection in the opacity section, I selected the fade parameter because I knew I wanted the opacity to fade in and out. Okay, so in its simplest terms, this material parameter collection will be the toggle that allows us to lerp between blue to red and semi-translucent to translucent. So now that we have this, what do we do with it? Well, we can simply place the material on the wisp and see what it looks like at the moment, and at the moment it looks something like this. Now the reason it looks like this is just at its like stationary point, nothing's really changed because we've not actually changed anything manually. So for example, I want to show here my previous level sequences that I've created where you can see the change happening to see what the material parameter collections have the ability to do. So you can see here for the wisp blue to red that it's changing between blue and red, which is quite cool. And then I have one for the KO, which is basically when the wisp dies in the game. And you can see here that it's fading out here. And these changes have been made possible by using the material parameter collections in the level sequence to make these changes happen. Obviously you can see here that the expression in the particles are changing colour as well, but this is essentially the same material setup going through lerps and using material parameter collections to be able to change them. So I'm not going to go over this lot in detail, but I will show you the setup. I'll just put them on screen just now in case you want to pause and look over them. Okay, so you've got this all set up, your materials, the collection parameters, and now you want to be able to change them in a level sequence to be animated. Well, let's go over that. So what you want to do is right click on the content drawer, go over to animation and level sequence. You'll see at the moment that it's empty, but if you go to the plus icon with the track, you can click here and go to material parameter collections, and you should have the collection that you had created earlier pop up. So you want to click on that one. You'll see if you hover over this area, there's a plus parameters button. So if you just want to click on that, and it'll display the two parameters that were created earlier. So for me, this is the color and the fade. Now nothing has changed as of yet, but this is because both parameters are set to 0. So 0 for this is completely blue and not fading out whatsoever. And now let's make the color 1. And you'll see that it's turned red, and if I go back over this, you'll see that there's a nice gradual change of the color. Of course, you can make this as sudden or as slow as you like. It just depends on how close you place the keys. And then let's say you want it to start fading in and out. So we'll add in the key of 0 here for the fade, and then let's go to the end and make this 1. And again, you'll see that the information transitions slowly. Of course, the particles and the eyes aren't doing anything at the moment, but if we just add in material parameter collections for this track, you can make these changes too and make it more cohesive. For the particle system, I'll quickly show you what I've got going on here, but I'm not going to go into much detail as I myself am quite new to particle systems, so I don't want to send any wrong information your way, but I will show you the setup just in case you're interested in what it looks like. So you can see here that it's a very simple particle system with very few particles, and this is mainly for performance reasons. We were making it for a small game, so it needed to be able to run relatively cheap. So that is why it is got very few particles. So you can see here that I started off with the fountain emitter and essentially tweaked this to get my desired results, making it slower in speed, having larger particles at the base and smaller at the top, changing the spawn rate and the lifespan. I also made it so it would take information from the skeletal mesh of the Wisp by adding a skeletal mesh location section. I also had to kill particles in volume to change where the particles emitted. So if I just turn this off, for example, you'll see that the particles emit everywhere else now, but using this limits that. And then of course, in the sprite render section, I used the material I wanted that would be the particle. But that is pretty much it. This is an entire creation of the Wisp from start to finish. I'm not sure as of yet how long this video will be, but I do think it's quite a long one. So if you watched until now, thank you so much for watching the whole way through, and I hope that it was helpful. If you have any questions, pop them in the comments below and I'll get back to you. And if you found the video helpful, give it a thumbs up. And if you want to see more stuff like this, then subscribe to the channel, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye!